Yo, what is up, my friends? Welcome back to What the French Toast, your favorite podcast on the internet that leaves you asking yourself the question. Megan, you want to take this one?
What the French toast did I just listen to?
I'm Skylar.
I'm Megan.
Guys, listen. My window in my apartment got busted. Did I tell you about this?
No.
So you've been in my apartment, so like the doors beside my couch. Well, The other day they had mowers out here and they were mowing or whatever.
They kicked a rock.
Yeah, he like weeded a rock like right into my window, and so it just like shatters my entire window. They had to come put like this big massive like wood right up against it, so that way my dog can just jump out and start running.
Yeah.
But it's crazy because like this was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they called
How
me
am I just now hearing about this?
I don't know. I made my peace with it apparently, but they called me last week and they're like, "Hey, we're replacing the glass," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, sweet." Come home, glass isn't replaced. Came home again, glass isn't replaced, and I'm like, did they tell me it was going to be like the next week? Like, am I wrong about this? So I call the office and I'm like, hey, didn't you guys tell me the glass was supposed to be fixed? And they're like, oh yeah, it's already fixed. And I'm like, I don't think it is. I'm looking at it right now and it's not fixed. And so I'm like, all right, cool. And so then they're like, well, we'll get it fixed. And so then this week they called me Monday and they said, hey, we're replacing the entire glass today. I'm like, all right, sweet. Come home Monday. It's not fixed. I'm like, what the heck, dude? And then today I'm at work and they call me and they're like, hey, can you come home? We need to get into your apartment, but we have to replace the entire door. And so we need you to let the door guys into your apartment because it's not our maintenance guys. Like, it's the door guys. I'm like, okay, sure. And so I leave work early. I come home like to let them into my apartment and they never showed up. So I'd
be so pissed.
I'm not happy about it. And so I had to leave work early for no reason. And still this massive thing of wood on my door. But then here's the thing is they were like, they said something and they said something about 2123, which is not my apartment number. And I asked them at the end, I was like, hold on, what apartment did you say? And they're like, yeah, 2123, but we know that's not your apartment. We have to fix something there first and then we'll go to yours right after. And I'm like, okay. And then at the very end, she said something along the lines like, I thought I heard her say something like, yeah, we can just go through your apartment whenever we enter. We can enter your apartment through 2123. And I'm like, hold on. My neighbor can come in my apartment? Like, I've lived here for like 5 months and I've never seen a gateway to my next door neighbor's apartment. You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to enter my apartment through their apartment? Yeah, anyway, Megan, how are you?
Anyway, great. My week has been fairly busy, but honestly, I'm like relishing in spending time. My entire like evening routine is like get in bed, cuddle with my dogs, play Clue on my phone, and it's been awesome. It's like the only thing I've been doing.
Let's go, Megs.
I'm like solving murder on a daily basis, y'all. Dude, I'm a detective.
As per the podcast and our questionable search histories, we could make detectives at this point. It's honestly, it's like a couple episodes ago whenever you were like telling the story and before you even told me, I was like, okay, so it was the security killed her.
Yeah.
And I was like, bro, I could be a detective.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's that simple.
We've been doing too much. We've been doing too much of this.
Well, if you think that you're going to solve this case today, you're wrong because you have no idea where this is going.
Okay. You hear my voice crack? I got nervous.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Is accepted, but I'm scared about it.
So today, have you ever heard of Roch Thériault? No, sorry, Roch Thériault. That's how you say his name.
Is that that's a person?
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking of Ontario. I was like, yeah, I've heard of Ontario.
No. Well, so, okay. This is a French-Canadian story, or this happens primarily in, like, French-Canadian areas. So a lot of the names are French-Canadian. I apologize. I am not. Okay? So.
She's just German.
Yeah. French, not my strong suit. German, a little bit. English, barely. So, Roch Thériault.
Okay. Sorry. My audio like cut completely out again, and I was like, dude.
Okay.
Sorry.
Roch Thériault called himself a prophet. His followers called him Moses. But behind the curtain of spiritual guidance and so-called healing was a reign of control, torture, and murder. My dog is digging in the carpet right now. Stop it!
Megan, what is this case?
This week, we're going to dive into the disturbing true story of Roch Thériault and the Ant Hill Kids, a Canadian cult that started with doomsday predictions and ended in one of the most horrifying cases of abuse and manipulation in modern history. Before we get into today's episode, please be advised that this case contains very disturbing content, including abuse, violence, graphic This is not going well. Yes, that's what I was attempting to say. I wrote down listener discretion is advised. Abuse, violence, graphic descriptions. Okay.
Graphic.
And it's entirely possible that I say his name one way and then I say it another way a different time. You know who I'm talking about. His name is Roch Thériault. Okay. I just didn't put his pronunciation every single time I say his name. So Roch Thériault was born May 16th, 1947, into a French-Canadian family and grew up in the town of Thetford Mines. I don't expect you to know where that is because I don't either. He was seen as a bright child, read lots of books, and was reported by teachers to have been intelligent, diligent, and excelled in school. According to his family and childhood friends, his childhood was allegedly quite normal. There are reports, though, of his father making him and his siblings dress up in white berets and march around like an army, going door to door begging for donations in honor of their beliefs. I didn't know what white berets were. Apparently, it's a group called the White Berets, aka the Pilgrims of St. Michael, and it's a Catholic group, maybe specifically from Quebec, but definitely active in that area, that promotes something called social credit, which is an economic theory claiming people who don't earn enough to buy what they produce, or people don't earn enough to buy what they produce, so the government should be like giving citizens monthly payments to fix the gap. And they kind of tied into like their Catholic beliefs and traditional living and stuff like that. So his father would make him and his siblings like go around to the different neighborhoods in their very small town, knocking on doors asking for donations. So of course, Roch's friends in school would make fun of him for wearing a white beret and marching around because it's like very different compared to what the other kids are doing, and very kind of not evangelical, but like very, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, you know what I'm trying to say. So throughout his childhood, this happening kind of caused a lot of loathing for the white berets and ultimately Catholicism. He decides to drop out of school just before 8th grade and start teaching himself the Old Testament. He would mow lawns for money and spend time at the town's dance halls, and he would like date a lot of women because now he's like free, I guess, and he's not in school. And he was reportedly very attractive. I don't see it, but whatever. Okay. I guess at the time, kind of like a Jeffrey Dahmer situation, you know what I mean? Where it's like it's or like a Charles Manson, like some people just thought he was attractive, but like he's not, you know?
It's like how people say like Marilyn Monroe back in the day. Marilyn Monroe back in the day was like
average. Or no,
nowadays if you were to like see her and like you're like, I don't really get it, but okay.
I mean, I don't think I thought it was the opposite. Like people would have thought she was like average at the time, and now she's like a symbolism of beauty for a lot of women. But okay, whatever. Right. What do I know? Yeah. And then eventually, after he was like dating and hooking up with a lot of women, he soon found the one that he wanted to marry. Why is this so hard for me? In November of 1967, now 20-year-old Thériault would marry 17-year-old Francine Grenier. Again, not French. They reportedly like started off having a very good life together. They ended up moving to Montreal. They had 2 sons together. It was reported that Roch was a drinker, but he was like really fun, like a fun drunk, and would like to play pranks and like just have fun and laugh. Okay. But during his wife's second pregnancy, she started to notice a shift in Roch's personality, and he was like starting to complain of stomach pain and diagnosed with stomach ulcers. There was a specific diagnosis that I don't remember, and I should have written it down and I didn't, but ultimately he ended up having to have 2 surgeries, removing a large portion of his stomach-ish. The surgeries were 1971, if that helps. But the second surgery had complications, and he had to return to his surgeon in 1972, and he was diagnosed with a condition called dumping syndrome. And basically that means like he wasn't able to digest his food properly, mostly due to the specifics of the diet. And it's pretty common in people who have this specific stomach surgery, but And it's not fatal, it's just chronic. So it is uncomfortable, but it is treatable. And so he was given medication and, again, not going away because it doesn't go away. But if he changes his diet and he takes his medication, he should be like pretty comfortable.
So it's like diabetes,
kind of, yeah. It is essentially an issue with like certain portions of the diet, like sugars and fats and different things like that. Because of the chronic pain and the chronic condition, because this is also in the 70s where medication and medical stuff wasn't nearly as like advanced. Yeah. So like now it's definitely treatable. Definitely like you can be comfortable and like live a very happy, healthy, normal life with a diet change and medicine. Then it was working, but like not great.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
His mental health begins to decline with this chronic condition, and he actually starts to become obsessed with medical books, like constantly reading anything he could find about anything medical, but specifically about his conditions, not only the dumping syndrome, but the ulcers and the stomach surgeries and those types of things. And he begins to unravel. He loses his job. He just isn't doing what he needs to do. So his family ends up making the move back to his hometown, Thetford Mines. He's complaining all the time. He is like telling everybody in the whole world, that everybody he sees, that his insides were all plastic now and he was going to die soon.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dumping syndrome is not typically fatal, like I said, but it is chronic and painful, but it's not fatal. And his insides are certainly not plastic. His stomach is just missing. Like part of his stomach is just gone.
Yeah, he's embellishing.
But like everybody is noticing changes in his behavior. Like prior to the surgeries, he was very strict about his wife dressing very modestly. And I mean, this is like he grew up in a Catholic family, so that kind of makes sense. A very strict Catholic family, wearing long dresses. But after the surgeries, he began to request that she wear shorter skirts, and he was like becoming obsessed with sex, talking about it nonstop. Reportedly was like seriously considering starting a nudist colony, which was like out of character for him, I guess. I don't know. Despite the fact that prior to meeting his wife, he was like dating all these women, hooking up with all these women. I don't know. Yeah.
Way out of
yeah.
Got it.
But then he began to claim that his stomach medications were impacting his sexual prowess. So he stopped taking them and then began using alcohol to manage his chronic pain, which of course is not helping with his stomach issue, but whatever. But this begins his lifelong battle with alcoholism. Yeah. And then on February 13th, 1976, Roch met a 24-year-old woman named Giselle at a dance party at a Holiday Inn. He invites her back to his room and somehow, some way, charms her into being his girlfriend despite the fact that he was married. Yeah. He claimed to her that he was dying of cancer and that his wife was cheating on him, which is 100% not true. He was cheating on her.
What a freaking story, dude. Who does that?
Oh, it gets so much worse. I know I already gave a trigger warning at the beginning. I'm going to give a few more throughout the episode as we get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff. So just a heads up, but it gets so much worse than this. So he charms her into being his girlfriend, and shortly after, him and Francine get a divorce. Giselle quits her job, and they travel around Quebec together, camping out in a tent. And eventually, they do rent an apartment in his hometown, so where they met.
Okay.
But in 1976, he starts to become obsessed with religion. You'll notice obsession is kind of a recurring theme for this man. But he starts claiming that he understands the Bible better than the entirety of the Catholic Church. They quite literally have like a man whose entire job it is to like work with God and like prophesize and stuff. But like
no big deal or anything.
Just
somebody who's dedicated their entire life, no big deal.
Multiple somebodies who've dedicated their entire lives, but all right. I would argue if there's anything they can do, they can understand the Bible, but whatever, what do I know? So in 1977, January 1977, geez Louise, he leaves, 1977, okay, that's the year. He leaves the Catholic Church and joins something called the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay.
I had never heard of this. Like, I feel like I'd heard of it in passing, but like not like a lot.
The seventh day part I've heard, I think.
So the seventh day. So I've done a lot of like side research to like put some of these things together to make sense. So the Seventh-day Adventist Church is a Protestant Christian denomination known for observing Saturday as the Sabbath instead of Sunday. And they like emphasize the imminent second coming of Jesus, and it's originated in the mid 1800s in the US, but it encourages like a healthy lifestyle, promotes veganism, abstaining from alcohol, tobacco, like all the bad things, like a very clean lifestyle. And I kind of get the impression that they're very, very evangelical, like very actively, like they're the type of people who knock on your doors type of people. You know what I'm saying?
Those people.
Yeah.
Okay.
But when he joined their like denomination, basically, he starts embracing their focus on clean living. He cuts out tobacco, he cuts out unhealthy foods, and he even stops drinking. And I 100% promise you, he felt better because that was exactly what he needed to do to help his stomach issues.
You know, that's not good for you. As somebody who has like, I was born with acid reflux, man, drinking is like the worst next day. It doesn't, even if I don't get drunk, even if I just have like anything alcoholic, just one drink, the next day I'm like, I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna throw up all day. I usually don't, but it's bad. It's not a great feeling.
Yeah, I agree. So he soon becomes obsessed with yet another thing: apocalyptic ideas. He was concerned that the end of the world was coming through a final battle with good and evil. And there's a lot of stuff that he did in this like time frame as far as like his work with the church, because he wasn't working at home. Before he left his wife, he had been like making handmade like wooden mugs and was doing that. And then that started to fail because he wasn't keeping up with anything. He was more focused on like going out and dating women and, you know, doing the things. So when he came to the church and he started getting active in the church, the kind of pastor Zeta, that was his name, kind of took him under his wing and was like, hey, you're really charismatic. I would really like you to sell these anti-smoking pamphlets in our Seventh-day Adventist, you know, church pamphlets, and like be the guy who stands on the corner and sells these things. So he kind of became that. But then in the process of that, as he's bringing more people into the church, he's kind of recruiting people, so to speak, into this belief. And eventually, Roch began to believe that the Pastor Zeta of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, was not knowledgeable enough or good enough to be leading these people he was bringing into the church. And he pretty much, Roch believed that he was like truly superior to pretty much everyone else that he ever interacted with. And he once wrote, quote, "Since my childhood, I have always believed I was different, not your average Joe. This was not only a mental impression, but also an anatomical one," end quote.
Okay.
Basically, he was saying he has a really big male part. That's all.
Listen.
Like, he's like, look, I'm good looking. I'm good in bed. I'm obviously better than everybody else. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, but then the thing is like, if he lived in modern day era in Texas, he would drive a massive lifted truck, and that's a fact.
Oh, fact, yeah.
Yeah. And typically, they're liars. I knew.
So initially, he's collecting followers under the guise of the Seventh-day Adventism Church. And so he's kind of like bringing these people in, and he's still working with the church. He just doesn't believe that the church, this specific I'm having a hard time today, y'all.
If you have a stutter, I apologize.
This
like a cell phone going off.
He didn't believe that this specific pastor was like worthy enough, good enough, smart enough, knowledgeable enough, holy enough, whatever, you know, adverbs you want to use for this. He didn't believe that he was like the right person to lead these people. So he begins to convince like these young people to leave their jobs and homes and join him in a religious movement, to form a commune where people would freely listen to his motivational speeches, live in unity and equality, and be free of sin. The people that he's attracting, though, are like typically young, attractive women, because of, you know, apparently he was conventionally attractive. But also it was just kind of anyone he was meeting like in a transitionary period of life. Like, some people say that you're like the type of people who get like indoctrinated into a cult are like people with low willpower or low self-esteem. But I think it's a lot of, I'm struggling through life right now. I'm kind of stuck where I'm at. I need help getting somewhere, basically. And you kind of, you know, maybe, yeah. So like transitional periods of lives for these people. And so then he began to meet these new people at his and Giselle's apartment for a little while. Like, they would just meet in the apartment and listen to him talk and just do their thing. Some of the people and this is relevant because they're going to come back later, a man named Jacques and his wife Maurice and their infant daughter. And Roch's charismatic nature kind of and speeches seduced Jacques into this like belief into this, church. And Maurice only came because her husband wanted to. She loved her husband. She wanted to support him. And she's described as like having kept apart from the others of the group, and unlike the other women, was not infatuated with Roch, like at all. Roch, whatever. And then there's a woman named Solange Bouillard, another woman named Gabrielle Lavallee, I think that's probably how you say it, and she was a young nurse, and that fascinated him because he had that like short stint of being obsessed with medical stuff, and so, And then another young woman named Chantel. Now her story is a little interesting because she was younger, and as she began spending all of her spare time in Roch's like company and at his apartment, her parents became increasingly worried and actually believed like very early on that she needed psychological intervention to free herself of like Roch's hold on her. And so she did. So she ended up agreeing to be admitted into a 30-day stay at a psychiatric hospital, but he somehow got a hold of her and convinced her to leave.
What a toxic individual.
So Roch began to realize that he was not isolating these people enough from outside influences, and he needs to get them away from like their loved ones. So in October of 1977, he rents a 2-story home or building, I guess, in Sainte Marie, which is about an hour's drive from their hometown. And again, he easily persuaded Chantel to come back from the mental hospital with them. That sounds harsh. The psychiatric facility, where they then opened something called the Healthy Living Clinic. And it reportedly helped a lot of people quit smoking, but this also helped bring in more followers because they were given like an inside look into the beliefs and how it was helping people. Yeah. And then in January of 1978, Roch and Giselle get married. But it very quickly becomes clear that Roch was not taking their marriage very seriously. They didn't go on a honeymoon. The group's like activities remained as normal. They didn't stop doing any of the things that they were doing. And of course, soon she becomes pregnant with their first child. But she was pretty frustrated because Roch didn't seem that interested anymore, and she threatened to leave him. But allegedly, he then punched her in the face at that time. So he was causing problems already. And then the people of that town they were in, Sainte Marie, were becoming more suspicious of him because he wasn't paying his bills. It was causing trouble in the area. They were just weird, And in fact, in March of 1978, he convinced a leukemia patient named Geraldine to leave the hospital because he promised he could cure her with grape juice.
This guy is pissing me off.
Grape juice. Yeah, he promised to cure her with grape juice. But unfortunately, she soon did pass away after joining his care. Now, police investigated. They could not find any evidence that Roch himself was responsible, but this did catch their attention, and they began to kind of keep a more watchful eye on the commune.
Mind you, this is the same guy that drank alcohol when he had stomach problems.
Yeah. So he may have been able to manipulate his followers, but at this... Oh, sorry, I skipped a bullet point here. Roch did claim at one point that he had kissed Geraldine back to life before giving her back to God. That's all the information I have.
So he's cheating on the other one.
So he may have been able to continue to manipulate the people that were following him, but at this point, Pastor Zita and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they were over it. They kick him out of the church. He's under too much scrutiny from the police. The townspeople of Sainte Marie and the family members of his followers are starting to be concerned about their family as well. And so this is a point where Roch determines that he needs to isolate his followers even more under the guise of protecting themselves from outside influences yet again. He leads them further into the wilderness. June 5th, 1978, they all pile into a truck, a bus, and a car, and the caravan leaves Sainte Marie forever. Yep.
Oh my.
I know. Police look for the followers after their parents and families filed missing persons reports, but all they found was an abandoned bag holding their identification documents, and that was kind of the end of it. July 6th, 1978, having been kicked out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Roch was free to preach whatever he wanted to at this point. He doesn't have to follow any of their beliefs. And his fear of the end of the world had been continually growing. And he claimed that God had came and warned him that the end of the world would come on February 17th, 1979. Yeah, but luckily for them, God had chosen Roch Thériault to be his prophet. So he renamed himself Moses, and he gave all of the people in the commune new names from the Bible. Here are some examples. Giselle became Esther, Solange became Rachel, and Gabrielle became Thirsta. I never heard that one, but whatever.
Yeah, she was trying to tell him something, and he misread it.
He preached that they would be safe from the end of the world because they were his followers, but they needed to find a place to rebuild society after the doomsday. So they began, he moved his commune again to a place that he called Eternal Mountain. And this is where he believed that they could restart civilization, bring peace to the world. And he prohibited the group from remaining in contact with their families, with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because this was against their values of like freedom and isolation.
I'm so interested, right? Because like it's so easy to hear a story like this and be like, dude, what in the heck is wrong with this guy? He's freaking insane. Like, what a piece of garbage individual, whatever. But it's like really sad. Like, there are people out there that are exploring religious options, and unfortunately, this is where they landed. And that's really sad to think about.
Yeah, it is really unfortunate because there are people like this who are taking advantage of people who are vulnerable and just looking for like hope in the world.
Yeah.
You know?
Manipulative little man. That's crazy.
Yeah. So while they were at Eternal Mountain, Thériault made the commune build their own town while he just relaxed and began to compare them to ants working in an anthill, and that's where the group became named the Anthill Kids.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
But this is also where it becomes kind of abusive and confusing for them because he would starve them, not let them sleep, and had them working around the clock to build their new like commune in their home. So this is kind of where it starts to like break them down so he can build them back up, basically.
Okay.
And he would begin to also start to have his followers confess their absolute darkest secrets to him so that, you know, he told them that the world and their families were evil, but that if they confessed to him, then that he would hold that for them, that they would be free of sin, they would be free of the shame and the guilt. But this is all a form of manipulation because he knows their darkest secrets. So if they threatened to leave, he, you know, would say something like, well, I'm going to tell your mom that you did this, this, and this, and she'll never take you back anyway, so you might as well just stay here. Okay. You know, so it's just blackmail, reinforcing any shame and guilt that they might have in their feelings. But as you can guess, because we are alive now, in February of 1979, the apocalypse did not occur. Okay.
Dang it.
And that's when his people started kind of questioning his wisdom here.
Right.
But he defended himself, saying that time on earth and time in like heaven, God's world, were not parallel, and that therefore it was a miscalculation.
Of course it was, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But at this point, Roch had broken down their willpower and their decision-making so effectively that they kind of just believed about anything he would say. So, but to expand their community, as well as keep their members devoted and around, Roch married and impregnated all of the women in the commune, fathering over 30 children with all the female members of the group, except for Jock's wife, Maurice. I know I kind of just ran through that. Basically, he made he made them all his concubines. He married all of them, impregnated all of them, and over the course of this entire story, fathered over 30 children. So, and so by the 1980s, the group had nearly 40 members. But at one point, the parents of some of his followers were they somehow convinced the police to take Roch to Quebec. Jesus. Yeah. I'm struggling. Yeah. So they took him to Quebec for a psychological evaluation. And a psychiatrist who evaluated him believed that he might suffer from schizophrenia. But somehow, Roch convinced that doctor that he was harmless. However, Roch had already been abusing his followers. We heard about some of that with the starving them, not letting them sleep. But, warning, from this point on, this episode contains graphic and disturbing descriptions of abuse in every single sense of the word: physical, sexual, psychological, emotional. Please proceed with caution. So, Roch began to move away from being a motivational leader as his drinking problem worsened. He started to exert a increasingly totalitarian, how can I say that word and not like psychological?
Yeah, the other ones. Yeah.
Any of the other words, okay.
Totalitarian.
Increasingly totalitarian control over the lives of his followers and becoming completely irrational in his beliefs here. So members were not allowed to speak to each other when he was not present, nor could they have sex with each other without his permission.
Of course.
He used his charisma to cover for his increasingly abusive and erratic behavior, but none of the other members questioned his judgment or openly blamed him for any physical, mental, or emotional damage. He began to inflict punishments on the followers that he considered to be straying by spying on them and claiming that God told them what he did, or God told him what they did. And if someone wished to leave the commune, Roch would hit them with either a belt or a hammer, suspend them from the ceiling, and pluck each of their body hairs individually, or even defecate on them.
Man, look, this guy needs to be humbled.
So the group, the Anthill Kids, they would raise money by like selling produce or selling baked goods around whatever town they were staying in. Like at the local town, they would go and sell them all, and and the people who did not bring home enough money were also punished. Over time, his punishments became increasingly more extreme and violent, including making members break their own legs with sledgehammers, sit on lit stoves, shoot each other in the shoulders, and eat dead mice and feces.
What in the French toast, dude?
Mm-hmm.
This is wild. Like, this is what scares me, man. Like, actually, I'm not going to say it.
There's so much more.
Yeah.
It gets so much worse, y'all. It really gets so much worse. In fall of 1978, he actually broke two of Maurice's ribs. Y'all, I'm about
together.
To.
Get it together, Megan.
I'm riding the struggle bus straight over this cliff in about 5 seconds.
Oh, my
Okay. In fall of 1978, he broke Maurice's ribs. You remember Maurice, right? She's the wife of that man, Jock. Okay.
Yeah.
Because she was starving and pregnant, and she did not ask his permission to eat 2 pancakes. Mm-hmm. And so at this point, Maurice is considering leaving the cult, but Roch bullied her husband, Jock, into cutting off one of her toes.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How? I don't understand. Okay. Continue.
The abuse did extend to the cult's children. His biological children were considered the chosen, and any children who were not his, for example, Jacques and Maurice's children, were literally referred to as slaves and treated like animals. It's actually reported that their infant son Samuel was the primary target of this abuse, and Roch would direct Jacques to punish the baby for crying by rolling the naked baby in the snow. Although all of the children were subject to sexual abuse, physical abuse, held over fires, they were nailed to trees while other children would throw stones at them. Everybody was subjected to it, but the kids that were not his biologically were much more subjected to it. So here's another trigger warning. What follows after this is trigger warning. What follows after this is this is not funny, y'all. What follows after this is increasingly horrifying descriptions of child abuse and extreme punishment. Skip ahead if you need to. In 1981, Roch's sons from his ex-wife Francine were 12-year-old Roch Jr. and 10-year-old Francois convinced their mother to allow them to join Roch in the wilderness. The commune throws a celebration to welcome the children, and his newest follower, Roch's newest follower, was a guy named Guy Veer. He reportedly suffered from mental illness, not specifying what that might mean, but I couldn't find any sources that said that. He reportedly punched Jacques' son Samuel, who's 2 at the time, in the face. But instead of taking the child to the doctor, this gave Roch the perfect opportunity to play doctor. He attempted to circumcise the toddler with a razor blade. As an anesthetic, he forced the 2-year-old to drink several ounces of pure ethanol, which is like the base of alcoholic drinks, like of alcohol.
Yeah,
it's a chemical. It's like 94% proof. Like, it's crazy. Unfortunately, Samuel did pass away due to this incident. And none of Roch's followers were really willing to blame him for Samuel's death, but Roch was certainly willing to blame someone else. And a few months after Samuel's death, Roch put Guy Veer on trial for the baby's death. Um, it's reported that everyone else in the group believed Guy to be blameless due to his mental illnesses, but Roch convinced him that Veer needed to be castrated, and he did so with a razor blade. But Roch had convinced Guy that this procedure would actually help with his headaches. So that Guy didn't know he was on trial. He just thought he was having a procedure for his headaches. But then this wasn't enough for Roch. He began performing mock executions on Veer as well. Unclear the specifics of that, but essentially pretending to execute him regularly. But finally, on November 5th, Guy Veer escapes and informs the authorities about Samuel's death. He gives them enough information to arrest Roch. Yay. So on December 19th, 1981, Roch was found criminally responsible for Samuel's death and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Oh, good. And you'd think this was the end of the story, right? No. 2 years was not enough to break Roch's hold on his followers. The group left the wilderness and moved into a house to be closer to the prison so they could go see him. Some of the followers, including Solange, almost returned home to their families while he was in prison, but Roch ultimately would manipulate them back into staying with the group. And his wife, Giselle, his first wife from the commune, even offered to let Solange be Roch's primary wife in order for her to stay.
I try not to get mad, because like these stories, like there's nothing I can do. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Like I wasn't even alive back in this time, and it's just merely a story of history that has already happened. But my God, dude, I don't know that I've ever been more mad at a story than this one.
It gets worse.
Oh, of course it does, Megan.
So of course it doesn't help that most, if not all, of the women at this point were tied to Roch with his children. And some of them had even given birth while he was in prison because, before he went to prison. He was released from prison in February 1984. May 2nd, 1984, they returned to the wilderness on a property he had bought in Kinmount, which is a town in Victoria County. I don't think I mentioned this prior, but I think I did. All of the area that they had been in previously had been French Canadian, where they mostly spoke French. Roch was bilingual. He spoke French and English, but most of the people that he had in his following did not speak English. They only spoke French. This new area that they lived in is a primarily English-speaking area, so this is a landlocked, wooded, and English-speaking area, further isolating Roch's followers as he was the only one who spoke both and would be able to communicate with any outsiders. He began drinking again, and this only made things more horrendous. He attempted to backtrack to the original religious mission of the commune, beginning to strongly believe that in purifying his followers and ridding them of their sins, through abusive purification sessions where the members would be completely nude as he whipped and beat them. Roch claimed to be holy again, started performing unnecessary amateur surgical operations on sick members to demonstrate his healing powers. January 26th, 1985, so a few years have gone by, obviously, at this point. Gabrielle Lavallée, I think that was her last name, yeah. She left their newborn baby, Eleazar, outside to die in freezing temperatures to keep him away from Roch's abuse. And they called the police. There was an autopsy done. And despite the obvious mistreatment of the baby, the coroner ruled the cause of death as SIDS. Which, in case you don't know, SIDS is like an unexplainable thing that can happen to some children. It's called sudden infant death syndrome. They haven't found a cause for it. They haven't, they're basically just, it's like random death, basically.
Okay.
But this kind of sparked social workers' eye, kind of caught their eye, and they began to keep a closer eye on the group. But they just didn't have anything. Like, they have these circumstantial things. They just don't have anybody who's willing to stand up against him. But in October of 1985, Maurice finally abandons the cult, and they have what they need to intervene. She was interviewed and revealed the sexual and physical abuse that the children were being subjected to. On December 6th of 1985, the social workers removed anywhere between 13 and 17 children, depending on the source you read, from the commune. However, Roch Thériault faced no repercussions for his abusive acts other than the children were not allowed to return to the commune. He was able to manipulate the court-appointed psychologist into siding with him, and whoever she was, she actually expressed admiration for Roch's lifestyle and insisted none of the children had been abused.
How does he keep doing this?
Yeah. With the children gone, Roch becomes even more violently unstable. Just a note before we continue, this part involves disturbing medical abuse and body mutilation. So listener discretion is strongly advised.
Okay.
In 1989, Solange Boillard complained of a stomach ache. Roch responded with a grotesque surgery. He punched her in the abdomen, performed a crude enema made of molasses and olive oil, then cut her open, tore out part of her intestines with his bare hands. He then forced Gabrielle to stitch her back up with a regular thread and needle, and had others shove a tube down her throat and blow into it. Solange died the next day from the damage inflicted by these procedures. He becomes even more unhinged after her death because he missed her so much that he remarries her in a ceremony on October 22nd after she was already dead.
No.
Claiming to have the power of resurrection.
Okay, yeah, because let's see how this one turns out.
I'm censoring here, but Roch had his followers saw off the cap of Solange's skull, and he performed necrophilic acts.
Wow. That's not fun. On the skull.
Well, I don't feel
Like,
comfortable
to the body.
saying specifically what he did. I'll tell you after the podcast. I just don't feel comfortable saying it on air. So,
Okay.
Google it if you want to know. It's in Wikipedia. It's fine. When Solange did not return to life, her corpse was buried a short distance from the Anthill's kids' commune, but not before Roch committed countless more necrophilic acts with various parts of her body, and he even made a necklace out of one of her ribs.
Okay.
It's also reported in various sources that Roch forced the other women to dig up Solange's body multiple times as well to retrieve different bones and experiment and perform other necrophilic acts post-mortem.
So, but then whenever he didn't bring her back to life, there was no, oh, okay, there was no question.
Yeah, no.
Okay. I mean, to be fair, they're probably terrified, so yeah.
Social workers did notice that Solange was missing. The explanation that they would get from some of the women was that she was off visiting her parents, but no one investigated any further than that. But Gabrielle Lavallee, the other woman who, was there, she also endured an unimaginable abuse at the commune. Roch burned her genitals with a welding torch, left a broken hypodermic needle embedded in her back, forcibly pulled out 8 of her teeth, and then after he mutilated her, he cut off part of her breast and struck her in the head with a blunt side of an axe. She attempted to escape, but she returned. Basically, she went to a women's shelter, went to the hospital, went to a women's shelter, and then the other women came and got her, and she wanted to be with her friends, like the girls, right? Because they're her sisters, they love each other, But when she returned, Roch was pissed. He stabbed her in the hand with a hunting knife to pin her hand to the table. He cut off one of her fingers with wire cutters, and then he used a meat cleaver to amputate her arm.
Dude, this stopped being of the religion and started being like, I'm going to kill you, just because I can.
Yeah. She does successfully leave after this, or he lets her go, or he takes her back somewhere, whatever. She goes to the hospital, and in 1989, Roch Thériault was finally arrested after Gabrielle Lavallee escaped the commune once again, went to the authorities, and effectively brought an end, supposedly, to the Anthill kids. Although the officials in the area had suspected long-term abuse due to the group's harsh living conditions, their hands had been tied because the commune was legally registered as a church, so they couldn't do anything other than investigate the welfare of the children, basically. Thériault was convicted of assault for amputating Lavallee's arm and sentenced to 12 years in prison. Most of his followers did abandon him after the arrest, but during his sentence, he still managed to father 4 more children with female members during conjugal visits. Lavallee's report opened the door to deeper investigations, uncovering the extent of the cult's horrors, including the murder of Solange Boillard. In 1993, Thériault pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in her death and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 10 years.
Okay, that's good.
By 2000...
the life in prison is good, not the possibility of parole.
By the year 2000, he had been transferred to Dorchester Penitentiary, a medium security facility in New Brunswick. But in 2002, his parole was denied due to the high risk that he posed, and he never applied again. In 2009, he sparked public outrage by attempting to sell his drawings and poetry through a US-based site called murderauction.com, and it's, quote, a true crime auction house. The Correctional Service of Canada blocked his artwork from leaving the prison, and the Public Safety Minister, Stockwell Day, publicly condemned the idea that Thériault could profit from his crimes while he was incarcerated.
Absolutely.
That's also a law here in the States as well, is that they can't. So you won't get a book or something from an actual person in prison that was written by them. They can't
legally anyway.
Yeah, they can't profit off of it. On February 26, 2011, at age 63, Roch Thériault was found dead in his cell at Dorchester Penitentiary. His death was believed to be the result of an altercation with his cellmate, Matthew Gerard MacDonald, a 60-year-old convicted murderer from Port-au-Port, Newfoundland, who was charged with the killing. MacDonald pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison, having already been serving a life sentence for a previous murder charge. MacDonald had stabbed Thériault in the neck with a shiv, walking to the officer station, handing them the weapon, and he proclaimed, quote, that piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up, end quote. We're almost done. There was some... he had a lot of psychological evaluations throughout his time in prison previous to his death. And he alleged a lot of abuse from his childhood. In fact, he wrote a letter to one of the victim's sister. Quote, I am from a family in which I was mistreated and beaten worse than a dog from the age of 2 until 14, when my father, having beaten me, threw me out of the house and told me to never set foot in it again, end quote. He was never kicked out of his house. He lived happily at his home. Despite the fact that he did claim to all of his followers that his father had been a violent alcoholic, neighbors and friends do not remember his father, Hyacinthe Thériault, as a drunk. He denies ever physically abusing Roch. Quote, I never beat the boy, but I punished him when he needed it, end quote. Other reported lies that he told was that he wrote a rambling memoir about his connection to nature as a child, and he claimed to tell Dr. Malcolm, a top psychologist from Toronto, that when he was 6 years old, he spent a day frolicking with a mother bear and her 2 cubs. He also claimed at one point that he was paralyzed from the ages of 6 to 8 years old, and he claimed that approximately in the year 1954, maybe he was around 7, he had a vision of himself playing Saint Joseph in a theatrical production, and then he received the role a year later, which is what attributes to his supposed knowledge of medicine and broken bones.
Supposed knowledge of nothing, bro. You killed people from... Okay.
Dr. Malcolm did describe Roch's lies as myth-making, so he just basically called him a liar. He was like, you're a liar, dude. Reportedly, Roch said that there was an incident where his father had badly injured him by punching him in the stomach, which is where his ulcers came from. He also reported that sometime between the ages of 9 to 12, his father had allegedly pushed him down a flight of stairs. Again, there's no evidence of this. Everyone that grew up with him says they had a very normal and relaxing and happy, healthy childhood, other than his parents being like strictly religious. It's also noted in many sources that his father reported Roch to have had manipulative behavior as a child even, but Roch was using these fabrications as a form of manipulation to excuse the behavior that he enacted. And some sources even allege that he was able to convince multiple prominent psychologists to pity him and even forgive him for his actions. So yeah. There was a movie called The Savage Messiah in 2002 that depicts his crimes against his followers. And I watched it today. It was pretty good. It's not a documentary. It's just like a dramatized, movie. It's based on the true story. I would assume the way that they like describe it, everything is true, but I don't know. It is dramatized. And Gabrielle Lavallee did write a memoir of her life. That in English, it's called Alliance of the U. And that is the story of Roch Thériault.
I've never, ever, in the 3 years that we've recorded this podcast, ever been so happy for someone to die.
That sounds horrible, but yeah, he was a monster.
I don't care, even if he was beaten as a kid, even if everything he said about his childhood was true, that is zero excuse, and I will never condone anything like that's ridiculous, dude.
Yeah, it's insane. He was insane. Some sources allege that he might have had like narcissistic personality disorder. Apparently, he also might have been schizophrenic. It's very clear that he had mental illness and some sort of personality disorder, regardless of whether or not he had abuse in his life. He was messed up.
Man.
And he hurt very many people and went on for like 10 plus years doing so. And there's reports that, police knew about a lot of this stuff. They just didn't have evidence of it, so they couldn't do anything about it. He had been under their eye for a long time as they moved around to different areas of Canada. And he had been also just in general, people were confused by him. But there was only so much they could do within the context.
That's ridiculous. Yeah, good riddance, dude. Man, that's frustrating. That was a lot.
Yeah, I told you it was a lot.
Man, okay. Well, that being said, I'm going to go take a shower and cleanse myself of this.
Yeah, I told you to bring a stress ball.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, no joke. But anyway, all right, Megan, anything else to add?
That's all.
Guys, like and subscribe if you want more stories like this. And if you don't want more stories like this, I get it.
But if you do, they're not always like this, okay?
No.
They're not always this heavy. I told you in advance. I gave you multiple trigger warnings throughout the episode. This one sucked, okay? And it was really hard, but once I started researching it, I had never heard of this before. I'd never heard of this cult before. So I had, once I started researching it, it was like I couldn't. It was like a train crash. I couldn't look away. I had to keep researching.
That's crazy. Guys, WTFTpodcast.com/shop. Get your merch. We've got new hats out. There's this white one. There's this black one. You got the little ghost symbol on the back here. Yeah, go comp your merch. And Tobitam, love you guys. Good night. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.